Hello, here we are again. This is Grammar and Linguistics, and this is our Prelim Class 3. I'm happy to see you again. I'm happy to see our viewers. We must thank all our viewers who have written to us and shared their views. We received messages from Diana, from Osvaldo. They are both from Jujuy, from Stella from Santa Fe. Micaela also is in the group together. She's from Tigre, together with Clara and Sergio. They are training to become teachers of English. Welcome to all of them, and we thank them for their views after watching and doing our last Zoom class. They sent some of the comments which I am going to read out to you later on. Centro de Estudios Ingleses, we are on Facebook, we are at Centro de Estudios Ingleses, and also the web page for those who want to become teachers, translators, and interpreters. Our web page is Ingresos en Profesorados y Traductorados. You can also leave your comments there, or if you prefer, you can join our Zoom classes too. This is Prelim Class 3. Why Prelim Class? In these Prelim classes, we introduce you to the topic. Later on, in our Zoomed classes, students and viewers develop the topic further after they've done their research. And this time, we are going to deal with Ferdinand de Saussure's views. What was and still is remarkable about this chap? As I told you in our last class, he is considered to be the father of modern linguistics. As a trendsetter, he cleaved the jungle of his predecessors' views on language and steered the path towards structuralism. In short, he made a major contribution to the development of language in the last 50 years, which paved the way for another major name that was ahead. Noam Chomsky. We are going to deal with that later on. But so much for praising him. We discussed these issues last class, and we have received some interesting comments from our viewers. Let us hear some of the comments our viewers have sent us. They are worth listening to, and if you want to submit your views, to send us your views on these considerations, you're welcome. Here I have Daniela from Córdoba. She answered the question, what is this thing about the priority of the spoken language he spoke about? And she says, for the first time, and changing the views his predecessors had had, Saussure pointed out that speaking comes first in a person's life. A child learns to write many years after he's learned to communicate orally. Thus, the spoken form was brought to the table of linguistic discussion. From Saussure on, the spoken form had a seat at the table. That is, the spoken form had a seat at the table. I like her phrase. This brings forward the issue of the long-held assumption that the spoken language was in itself more corrupt. Remember the division between the language of the cult, the language of the clergy, of the Latin used by priests, which was the only language looked at. The other, the spoken one, was stigmatized and looked down on as corrupt. There was a difference between the way scholars used language and the language that was used by the folks. Here I also have Osvaldo's words. Osvaldo is from Jujuy, and he says to us, the idea that people don't speak as they write was uppermost in Saussure's mind. Nor should they. I suppose he means, nor should they speak as they write. In the times and times preceding his time, I like his phrase, these considerations of the priority of the spoken language had been left aside. What were Saussure's justifications? On to the second question we asked, that viewers responded with interesting comments. Saussure said, linguistics is descriptive rather than prescriptive. And this has to do with the former idea of corruption of the spoken form. They are related. The written language was the only one to be taken into account. Therefore, if the spoken form differed from the norm, it was simply out of the picture. Any difference was simply disregarded. This has made teachers believe that the only form to be taught is the only one that the grammar accepts as correct. So, should you arrive in Harlem in New York and hear somebody say, "This ain't been no good," you are likely to consider this to be wrong. This is acting prescriptively. The norm, the rule, says that it should be, "This isn't going to be any good," and you would accept this. Well, this would be acting prescriptively. You are prescribing what people should say. If, on the other hand, you studied the forms used by a certain group of speakers at a certain time, and those forms were accepted by the group and used effectively, you would be acting descriptively. You would be describing what people actually say, rather than prescribing what they should say. For Saussure, they would be wrong. It would be the language used by a particular group of people, and that would be the object of study. He shed some light on this question. He said, no group of speakers can communicate with one another more or less successfully. No group of speakers that communicate with one another more or less successfully speaks better or worse than any other, as long as what they say is in keeping with the linguistic behavior of that group. A linguist should describe rather than prescribe. Speakers create norms of usage at will. They are accepted and they are used. This has become the language of such group. Besides, languages are subject to constant change because societies evolve. So do their needs, and their language reflects this. Science is not authoritative. Science is descriptive. Why are these conclusions relevant? Because they will lay the foundations of all linguistic research in the years to come after Saussure. He was paving the way, for instance, for what is going to be discussed later, the speech act theory. But now, let me get my teeth into the topic of our next Zoomed class, July 14th, from 3:30 to 5:30, or July 17th, from 6 to 8 p.m. You choose. The two issues that are going to be tackled in our next Zoom class are diachronic versus synchronic description. This was another major contribution made by Saussure, and also the question of langue versus parole. These are two French words. Parole is the typical manifestation of speech, where through individual use of language, each person creates a particular style that characterizes it in the process of communication in society. Whereas langue is a complete system of linguistic science that allows to configure and determine the use of grammar, phonology, and vocabulary. This system is conventionalized according to the communicative needs of a society. Here you have a graph with those definitions. And I wanted to pay attention to this question of conventionalized according to the needs of society. And my question is that the end of the discussion, or are there further elements to consider? Please think about this issue. We are going to discuss this. Then we have the question of sign and signified. Here you have a drawing. I would like you to look at this drawing and see how this is related to Saussure. The questions that I would like you to think on in order to discuss them in our next Zoom classes are the two principles we have discussed so far relevant to the teaching of English as a second language? How so? try to think of the influence of classical methods on the teaching of English. What bearing do they have on the two other issues Saussure discussed, synchronic and diachronic linguistics? We are going to discuss the priority of the synchronic description. The discovery of synchronic description, Saussure compares this to a board of chess. How so and why? Does a diachronic description matter to us teachers in our approach to language teaching? How so? The most disruptive question. When Saussure speaks of language change, is he encroaching in the realms of sociology? Can language be studied more universally without having to account for the differences of language in different groups? This will be a sociological answer. And finally, try to provide a definition of structuralism that we can discuss. Do you think you are ready to discuss Chomsky? I wish you good luck. Thank you again for being so motivated. Again, I thank our viewers for having sent us your comments. And remember, if you want to leave your comments or queries, please write to us to www.centroenglish.com.ar, fill in the contacto form, send it, and that's it. We will provide you with the link. Next Zoom class is Tuesday the 14th or Friday the 17th in July. And here you have some cards to look at. You have Daniela's words in case you want to have them in writing, and you have Osvaldo's words. Okay? Well, I am really happy to have met you again. Send you a big elbowing. Bye-bye.